one of the things that folks seem to do to apologize or to forgive the folks that are trying to ban books um, is that uh, they go, well, the left is always trying to uh, thought police. They're always trying, like there's cancel culture. Well, if there's going to be cancel culture, then why can't we cancel this book? Or why can't we stop, why can't we stop children from accessing things that we don't think that they should have access to? How would you respond to that? How would you what would you say to that? Oh, Robin, you're on mute. Let me fix that for you. There you go.
There I am. Um, I have a personal sort of connection to this. My kids, my grandchildren, actually live in Parkland, Florida, and they are part of Broward County. I'm sure you've heard of Parkland, unfortunately, because of the mass shooting that was in a school. And the governor of that state, as you well know, has been doing many, many things to reverse rights for human beings in that state. And one of the things that he did was made sure that he had a hand in choosing school board members in the counties, in all of the counties in Florida. I believe that there were 27 up for election in the last election, and 23 were people that he personally advocated for. So this is a local grassroots effort to completely take over the school boards in that state. So they will continue to ban books and to do other things to make sure that our children do not receive the education that they should about civil rights, about all of the injustices of our country, and they are trying to change that. So this is a pervasive, statewide problem in Florida, but it's also extending to other school districts around the country. So, Tim, I'm so glad to hear that you are part of the political sort of, effort to change minds and to try to educate people in your community, because I think that that's what we have to do in order to make sure that this doesn't become something that gets even bigger than it already is. So
What
I'm worried about them. I really am. I'm worried
I
about them.
mean, there's a lot of places that you can go in your mind when you start thinking about this. Like we're banning books about LGBTQ students and children. We're banning books about Black and Brown students and children and adults. We're banning books that contain any sort of description of sex or sex
Mhm.
acts, whether they be in a context or not. But we're not banning certain books that contain that content just because they meet up with some sort of um, ideological need of the people who are trying to ban books. Um, and I so then we start going down this road of, well, are we going to start banning and we've also started banning public performance of things like
Right.
drag shows.
Yep.
um do we then ban being gay in public? Do we ban?
Well,
Go ahead.
it's happening in our local governments too. Look what's happening in Wyoming. When somebody who's a representative is silenced and not allowed to speak because She objected to a bill, that an anti-trans bill that was being presented in that government. It happened in Tennessee with the Tennessee Three, where they were actually, two black representatives were actually ousted, right, because of their objection to the gun laws that needed to be changed in Tennessee. So it's schools, it's governments, it's pervasive.
A
My,
couple of
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's funny you mentioned drag queens because Linda and Robin know a couple of weeks ago I was in a new play by a local Philadelphia playwright as part of the Philly Theater Festival, Philly Theater Week, call it how you will, and I played a drag queen. And so it was really interesting kind of bringing that character to light amidst all of the negative attention to drag queens that's happening in the media. And there's always, I think, a bit of a fear that, as an actor playing this character, that, something negative might happen to me. That, if I'm walking out of the theater and I still have, my makeup on, that's something bad might happen. And that's scary because people shouldn't have to, fear, based on their identity or, those choices like that. And it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know where we're going with this. What my point was, and was that, like, there are a lot of places that you can go in your mind with this, and then you kind of at least I do. I don't know if everybody else does. I double guess myself. I go, okay, right. So, these folks are after some folks in who are in our society. I One of the things I'm trying to stop myself from doing, constantly saying, is these folks, and like package it into an us versus them narrative, because like, in the news we do that all the time. We package it as an us versus them, or like it's something that's happening in some other body of people. These are our people that are part of our daily society. You probably meet somebody every day who believes in banning books for one reason or another. But
Mm.
at the same time, um, you know, uh, and there are places that you go in your head when we start down this trail. Is it actually a slippery slope? Do these things actually result in um, in the larger narrative that we are that folks are worried about, that this leads to actual, well, I mean, it is actual fascism, that it leads to a scenario like Nazi Germany, that it leads to terrorism, Holocaust, targeting of people that aren't like the group that has the most political power.
Mm.
I mean,
Um,
I think
yeah.
a lot of people forget this, but you know, Adolf Hitler was elected democratically. So, it's scary to think that, 6 million people can die, from a democratic election, and all it takes is, one idea to latch onto, and if you can make enough people believe it, then it can happen. We had a scare, I think, with, when Donald Trump was elected and, began to espouse, certain ideologies that were, contradictory, to what was, accepted, and deemed right by society. And there were a lot of comparisons that were made, and it's scary to think that, he might, try and, run for president again and get that election again because the same thing might happen.
Yeah, and I wonder, I wonder if this is amongst the lessons of history that we forget that we learned already. Um, and people talk about not not having history repeat itself, but also talk about um, the sorry, my child just gave me a donut and he doesn't want to go downstairs. Um, at any rate, we talk about folks talk about not erasing history when they talk about just destroy taking down statues. Isn't it more important? At least it is more important in my viewpoint to constantly create new works, like Hidden the Musical, like Diary of Anne Frank, and constantly publish them and review them and keep them alive. Not to just have statues that represent folks who committed massive treason against the country for no apparent reason.
It's interesting that you bring up, that we say we don't want to repeat the past, and that is one of the themes in Hidden. In fact, that this show ends with a rousing song called "Never Again," and it's not just about Nazis and Jews. It's about children in cages, and it's about xenophobia, fear of foreigners, people crossing borders, and anybody who wants to be who they are should not be demonized for who they are. That's a huge theme in the show. And you spoke, James, in the beginning about creating our own destiny and controlling our own destiny, but there are so many people for whom their destiny is being controlled by others, and that's just not right and not fair. And so, if we say never again, it means never, and we shouldn't allow it, and we have to stand up against it. And education and knowledge is a key to that, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to spread that word that this is not just a show about one child being hidden in France during World War II. This is about what's happening now and how we don't want that history to repeat. And forgetting about it is not going to make it not repeat. In fact, it's more important to remember it, to acknowledge it, even if we're looking at examples of what shouldn't be done, like the statues that people want torn down, or, being forthright about acceptance and about tolerance and about standing up for injustice.
Yeah.
So never again, it means never.
Unfortunately, I don't know, like we said never again about, household abortions and women dying because of birth problems, and yet that's happening again.
Yeah.
So I wonder, while the wish of never again is real, I wonder how we execute that. I wonder, how we make that a reality. So in its investigation of itself, Central Bucks found it didn't discriminate against LGBTQ students, and it hired very expensive law firm Dwayne Morris to prove its point, which Dwayne Morris released a report that has tens of thousands of pages. And Timothy, you're really good at this, so if you want to read through this report and come back and comment on this at some point in the future, I would love it.
Well, yeah, if you want to email me a copy. It's also important to point out that the school district also spent a substantial amount of money on an expensive PR firm to help shield them from looking like the asses they are.
Yeah. The full report is 123,000 pages of documents plus a couple hundred pages of commentary. So anyway, but yeah, this is the kind of thing that it's interesting to me. Yes, they hired a high price law firm and a high price PR firm to basically say, oh no, we investigated ourselves and we found we did nothing wrong, which is always wonderful to hear out of the government or police. Yeah. Um, just wrapping around to paid endorsements then, like I said in the intro, Twitter recently changed its blue checkmark policy. If you're not a fan of Twitter or don't use Twitter, Twitter, like most other social media, has the easy ability for users to post as if they're anyone. You don't have to be verified that you are who you say you are. And like most social media, up until recently, Twitter had a process of verification. And you could go on Twitter, and if you were a famous enough person that you might logically have your identity replicated to say that you aren't saying something that you are saying, Twitter would review your information that you supplied them and provide you with a blue check mark to say, yes, this is really this person. They are saying what they're saying through their tweets. And recently they changed that to be anybody with $8 can submit their phone number and a copy of their ID, and they can receive a blue check mark. And it's not even really like the phone number and ID requirement isn't even that stringent. They don't verify it against who you're saying you are on Twitter. They just give you a blue check mark. So after instituting that policy, Elon Musk, CEO, owner of Twitter, decided to go ahead and sponsor several famous people's blue check marks and quote unquote pay for them. I don't know how Elon Musk pays himself $8 a month for somebody else's blue check mark, but there you go. He quote unquote sponsored several famous people to say that they to have blue check marks. And if you click on the check mark, it says why somebody has that check mark. Those people that he sponsored, it just said that they had verified their information and paid for Twitter Blue. So instead of now being a way to verify that somebody is saying what they're saying, it is now a way for Elon Musk to say that somebody is saying something that they aren't saying, which is that they would pay for Twitter Blue, which resulted in a lot of people pushing back on that concept, threatening to sue, that kind of thing. But this all results in basically paid endorsements, and where it ties back here, I think, is when you pay a high-priced PR firm, they're gonna say what you want them to say, right? Who thinks that if you pay a PR firm, they're going to or a high price law firm, they're going to tell you, oh no, you actually violated these civil rights, and here's where you did it. But we have this problem in politics in general, that folks can contribute any amount of money to a political campaign, and it basically ends up that all of that politician's speech is a paid endorsement for whatever they are speaking about, and it's become even a pervasive problem here in local politics. Tim can talk to this a little bit. I think you can talk about the campaign that you have with the environmental justice for Cobb's Creek, and like what's the background there? What has been happening with Cobb's Creek? Where is the money coming from? Where is it going? What are we doing with Cobb's Creek?
So, that's a very long story. So I'm just going to hope that people have a little bit of background, so I can get into some of the details, but I'll go over it just very basically. There is a large golf course on the edge of the city that has been leased to a private developer for $1 for a period of at least 30 years. And this private developer, they've set up a nonprofit foundation, but they are a developer. They're, spending $1 million+ or $100 million on this project. They have basically bought and paid for a city council person in the district who controls what's going on, as well as a state representative. Now, the new thing that has recently come to light is that the state representative has also been the beneficiary of donations from people connected with the foundation. And there's a very clear, timeline that shows these donations were not coming from people before her involvement. The state rep in question is Morgan Cephas, or Cephas. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Now, what's surprising to me is the amount of money that is given to these politicians is relatively small. You would think, to influence politicians would cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, but on a local level, you can do it for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And what we have with this golf course is these developers are giving money to the people who are in charge of making decisions about what happens, relatively small amounts of money. In the case of Curtis Jones Jr., the city councilman, we're up to about $50,000 over the course of several years. And in the case of the state representative, it's actually only, I think, about $7,000 or so over the course of a year and change. But in exchange for these paltry sums of money, they're able to go through and basically ignore environmental regulations and laws, cut down 1% of the trees in all of the Philadelphia park system, which it's a staggering amount considering that Philadelphia has the largest park system of any major city in the country.
And
then if it
I also find it interesting that the systemic and social impact of this this drive is that while cutting down 1% of the trees in the park system, and that doesn't sound like a lot when when you look at 1%, but 1% is huge. If we had a disease that was taking over 1% of the trees in the park system, we would seek to eradicate it. We actually have. And they're also destroying a floodplain, which will lead to additional flooding in a historically underserved Black community in Philadelphia. Which I find fascinating, that there are massive environmental regulations that have been set up to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen, and we're just skipping over them.
Yeah, that is definitely the case, and it's in exchange for paltry sums of money. And I'm sorry, I would have prepared something a little bit more in depth. I came prepared to talk about the mayor's race.
Oh, no. I'm going to tie this into the mayor's race. I just wanted a kind of 1,000-foot overview, but yeah. No, that's perfectly fine. I think we get this story, and when you say paltry sums of money, it really is paltry sums of money. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but at the same time, it may sound like a lot to somebody who just, is working every day, and trying to make your next, $1,200 rent payment. But when you're talking about $20,000, $30,000, that's nothing to a politician and nothing on the national stage, and less than nothing to the 1%, the top 1% of the economy that is most influencing politics at the moment. Um, but tying it back into, like how these things are happening, we've got a similar situation in Florida with the Florida Surgeon General early
Mhm.
on in the COVID-19 pandemic, um, really pushing against vaccines, and pushing forward alternate treatments. He even jumped on some very obviously not not medical
Mm.
ideas that were being pushed by folks
That's
who
great.
basically practice witch doctor medicine.
Yep.
Um, and it come to find out recently through FOIA requests, journalists have found that he was receiving a relatively small sum, but on the order of like fifty to $100,000 to do this. And at his direct hand, he altered a sentence
Yep.
in an early study of COVID Moderna vaccine, to say that in the last sentence, it said that it showed no increased risk of any adverse medical conditions for any age group. And he directly altered the report to say that it showed an increase of cardiovascular risk for men
Mhm.
ages 19 to 36.
Yep.
How do you just add that to the report? Um, that's going to affect millions and millions of people. And with with modern technology, modern internet, modern transfer of information, that report was then used as a justification
Mm.
nationwide, and cited by national news figures, uh, in, you know, denying people the medical care that they needed to avoid a deadly disease. Um, anyway, I just, like, I bring that up. It doesn't tie nicely into everything else. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on it, but feel free to jump in anytime you want to. Any of these things that you have any opinions on, feel free to jump in, and say what you're thinking. Um, but we're approaching the mayor's race in Philadelphia. Um, Here in Philadelphia, the mayor's race is all but decided in the primary race, amongst the Democratic candidates, by the Democratic Party, because we haven't had an electable Republican for probably 4 generations. And we rarely, if ever, elect Republicans to the mayor's office in Philadelphia. Um, and if there weren't protective clauses holding 2 seats of city council for a minority party, we probably wouldn't elect any Republicans to city council either. um, all that to say, um, we're there are journalists that are concerned with where money is spent in the Philadelphia mayor's race, and um, one of the big proponents for uh, massive changes to education and the school board, and what books children are allowed to read, how people are allowed to vote. Mr. Jeffrey Yass. I don't know if you all have heard of him. But he's a definite one percenter. He has quite a lot of money in politics in Philadelphia, and his third party campaign group has recently begun endorsing various candidates. And if you trace back some of the money that is going towards the Cobbs Creek project, if you trace back some of the money that's going to other environmental, in my opinion, environmental disasters, like the FDR revamp, it all goes to Jeffrey Yass. I find that fascinating. At any rate, let's talk about the Philly mayor's race. Tim, who do you think is electable in this race?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you like is really who's electable, and all of the candidates have their bases. But basically, there are five serious candidates at this point. You've got Jeff Brown, Helen Gim, Rebecca Reinhart, Alan Dom, and Sherelle Parker. And those are the five serious candidates. There's been, the progressive side of my community has been very focused on either Rebecca Reinhart or Helen Gim. And it sort of has been ignoring the reality of the situation. And I think the most likely outcome will be Sherelle Parker will be our next mayor.
Really?
She is the only serious Black candidate left after Green dropped out, and actually Green endorsed her yesterday. Almond Brown and DeLeon are going to take small percentages of the Black vote, and along with Jeff Brown, but more or less, Sherelle Parker has that demographic on lockdown. If you look at her endorsements with wards and other organizations, that's it's just a fact of how things are. And then you have the remaining candidates fighting over who gets the white moderate and progressive vote. And when you split that vote four ways, there's just the math doesn't work for anyone but Parker. They would basically have to get more than half of both of those demographics, one candidate, in order to win. And I just don't see that happening.
There was a report done about 14 days ago, about 2 weeks ago, by Ernest Owens, mentioning that 42% of Black voters are still undecided in the mayoral race. I find this an interesting mathematics discussion now. What you think most of that 42% is going to break for Parker?
I mean, yeah. If you look at, I mean, the past is not an accurate predictor of the future, but it gives you a good idea. And historically, the Black community is going to come out for one of their own. The three serious candidates, in my opinion, are the three women. And no matter what happens, my hope is that for the first time in the history of Philadelphia, our mayor will be a woman. It's about time.
Yeah.
But I do see that historically, the Black community supports their own as their primary choice, and I don't see any of the other candidates making extensive efforts to reach out to the Black community. It is really why I see it going that way. I don't.
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with Rick Lewis, who is a regular guest on the show, and he's asking folks to vote for Gim. I'm asking folks to vote for Reihart in my private capacity. I would like to have all three of the serious contenders that you mentioned on this show to just talk for an hour. So I'm not like saying that any one of them is going to win personally, but uh, from what I've seen, I find the most support in Gim. Even though I think politically, Reihart is probably the best candidate as far as how she operates or how she has operated in the past. Um, any thoughts? Any thoughts, Linda or Robin or Drew on the mayor's race?
I think you made a valid point that people tend to vote for and support those who represent their own interests, and that may translate into someone who looks like them. I also like the idea that there could be a female mayor, a woman mayor in Philadelphia. I'm watching from a distance because even though I was born and raised in Philly, I live in the suburbs. I've lived in the suburbs for many years, but it obviously what happens in the city affects me directly because I am adjacent to Philly and I like to go into the city occasionally. And I don't like seeing what's happening as far as violence and crime and danger. It just seems unsafe. And the schools need work. And, as I said, people vote for their own interests. And politics is politics. So politicians tend to tell people what they want to hear, and following through on promises is not always the case. But it's a very interesting race, and I look forward to seeing a good outcome. Whatever that.
I'm curious to see how the follow through happens. One one study done, I believe before this was done a while back, before one of the presidential elections. I believe this was the first Obama election. This study was done, but candidates follow through or attempt to follow through with their campaign promises something like 92% of the time. And that's a made up statistic, but it is a large number in the 90s that campaign promises are attempted to follow through with. So I often find that one of the things that makes a determination for me as far as who I would vote for is who can actually get that thing done that they're promising. Because you have a lot of candidates in this election with very similar promises. Um,
Yes.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
they're all being somewhat pragmatic, on policing. I think there's a lot of information out there mischaracterizing their promises. Um, Rick was in fact saying that Reihart was essentially promising to increase the number of police, and Gim was the only one promising to uh, uh, re revamp the police in Philadelphia. And I think if you look at their campaign information, you'll find that really all of the candidates are promising to, address police violence in one way or another. I think Sherelle Parker is the least likely to actually address anything in her campaign, other than providing more money for the police. But yeah, I find it fascinating that that's your prediction, Tim. And I'd like to talk more about it, but it is 11:04. Um, I'm gonna do last thoughts with Linda and Robin and Drew, and then Tim, if you can stick around for a minute, maybe we can talk a little bit more election stuff, and get to a place where we have a thought on this election. But last thoughts. Let's start with Drew. Do you have any last thoughts for today's coffee break chat?
I just want to say that it's been great to get the message of Hidden the Musical out there and in front of the um, Philadelphia audience and community, especially one who can appreciate the story, of a marginalized, individual. I think it's great.
Awesome. Last thoughts, Robin.
It's interesting that we're talking about Cubs Creek and the mayor's race and all of the problems that are going on in Philadelphia and around the country. And we have projections in our musical that will be projected on the large site at the upstage of the theater, and one of them has the headlines of the day, the headlines that you see across the country about all of these things: corruption and crime and anti-Semitism and xenophobia and anti-trans governments, issued bills that are coming up in all of these Congresses. And so when you say, how do we connect these thoughts that we're talking about today, I think that they are connected. And that's one of the things that our show is trying to represent and give out to the communities, that, this is all connected and we really need to pay attention to it. And we need to do it now.
Great. Thank you so much. And last thoughts, Linda, if you would please.
I guess I'll just add to what Drew and Robin said. I hope that many of your viewers will come and see the show. If you go to hiddenthemusical.com, there is a link to purchase tickets for Saturday, May 20th and Sunday, May 21st. I hope to see many of you in the audience, and I am delighted to be part of this wonderful, important project. Thank you, James, for having us as part of this event.
No problem. Thank you for coming on and talking about Hidden the Musical. Folks, if you're watching, please check out their production information. It's all been posted in the chats, and it's up underneath of us in the video. Go see Hidden the Musical. Go ahead and enjoy that show, and hopefully you will learn things that you didn't know before, and or have history refreshed for you, so that we don't repeat it again. I'm going to go to just a 2-up of me and Tim, and we'll talk about some of this stuff. Hang on a second, let me get that in place. There we go.
James.
Thank you guys,
Thank you,
and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
And Tim, let's talk a little bit more about the mayor's race. Sorry, one sec. Wrong screen. There we go. All right, you guys are clear. Feel free to head out, or you can hang out in the chat and you can listen to the conversation. But yeah, mayor's race. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on there. So your prediction is Sherelle Parker because you see Black voters voting for a Black candidate.
Well, I mean, not just Black voters voting for a Black candidate. I see Black voters voting for the most qualified candidate. Sherelle Parker, despite being relatively unknown on city council, has had a long political career. She spent a decade as a state rep, 5 years of which she was the leader of the Philadelphia delegation at the State House. And then she's been a council member for, I believe it's 8 years or 7 and change, which gives her the most legislative experience of any one of the candidates. In addition to that, she's actually born and raised in Philadelphia, the only of the serious candidates who is. And I see that resonating more strongly than than it will for other candidates.
I She has legislative experience, yes. However, I often find that legislative experience doesn't translate into executive experience. What And I think voters feel that or understand that in general. It is often a topic of election campaigns. Um, where do you see that part of it coming into the election? I don't, Sherelle has a lot of legislative experience, and yeah, she has the knowledge, the institutional knowledge of how city council works. But I don't know of any executive or executive branch experience in her history.
Well, I mean, the leading the Philadelphia delegation in the state house it's a certain type of, it's not executive branch, but it is an executive position. It's a leadership position in the state house, the Philadelphia delegation being rather large, as the house is based on population, unlike the Senate for counties. So that is that. I mean, if you wanted to look at who has the most executive experience in the candidates, it would either be Ryan Hart or Jeff Brown. And for various reasons, I don't think Ryan Hart is going to do as well as people want, but I could be wrong. I mean,
What's your reasonings there? Because I've been a big supporter of Reinhardt since the beginning. Um, I think that she has how I described it to Rick earlier today. I think is kind of cuts to the important part. I think Reinhardt. I think anybody who's entering the mayor's office uh, during this election, they're faced with a set of problems, and those problems are you have a varied and very vocal electorate who want very disparate things. You have a new city council that is literally all new. Like it, yeah. There's a couple of incumbents, but basically everybody that's there has not much experience running a city council. Um, and you have a state house that constantly fights Philadelphia for dominance in the just general politics of Pennsylvania. You have a state house that's fighting your city and the city that you're running with everything it can by doing everything it can to make your city more difficult to run. So
I don't think that's necessarily the case currently. The whoever becomes mayor has a very short window when the state house, is currently the House of Representatives is controlled by the Democratic Party, albeit a super slim majority of one vote, and they've got the governorship. So you're going to have to be willing to make compromises in order to get things through the Senate, but it's the closest the Democrats have had to support on the state level in a long time. And Reinhardt is clearly lacking in experience in dealing with state government. All her experience is focused on the municipal level. And again, that is one of the strengths of Parker. She's the only candidate up there, I mean, except for Almond Brown, who hasn't really passed any legislation, who also has state level experience. And you're 100% right that we need the support of the state to solve the problems that we have in the city.
um, so I mean that does add an interesting wrinkle. I think that It is interesting that Parker has a lot of state house experience. I just don't know that. I don't know the the popularity contest aspect of any election is always at least half of the election, and the popularity contest aspect has Reihart and Gim as the front runners.
Well, I mean, but does it though? We don't have any independent polling, and we won't till the end of the week.
Sure.
But
um,
I mean, but is who you think are the front runners? Is that a function of the community that you're immersed in, or is that representative of the community at whole?
I always
Of the
ask
entire
that.
city.
I've been asking that of myself for the past few days, and I think uh, the community I'm immersed in is relatively representative of the black community as far as younger black community. That's the community I'm immersed in. The folks who are active in politics. They vote. They are active in the community. They're trying to solve the problems that the city faces. And I have a lot of interlinks with the white activist community too, but I see that less as a dividing line in future going politics, younger politics, than it used to be in older politics. So I'm kind of right on the cusp of the generations there. Like, what I consider older politics is probably folks like my block captain or the older members of city council. Actually, probably all the candidates currently would find themselves in the camp of the older political community where things were much more divided by race and ethnicity and sociologically than I think they are going forward. I could be wrong. My
No, I only ask because if based on the community that I'm in West Philadelphia, it would be a foregone conclusion that no one but Helen Gim could be our mayor.
hmm,
That's what I'm surrounded with 24/7. On the ground and to a large extent in social media from all of my friends and neighbors who live nearby.
right.
But I don't I've been trying to take the look of the entire city, looking at ward endorsements and union endorsements, and to see like who's going to actually be on the ground on election day. Because unfortunately, I mean, it's less so in primaries, but unfortunately, a lot of our electorate is not as informed as they could be. And, people having someone at the polling place on election day to talk to potential voters, will make a huge impact. And people with a big street team, are going to have the biggest chance.
But the
I
popularity aspect drives the street team aspect. The most popular candidates get the money, and when they get the money, they spend it on the street teams and stuff like that. I mean, from that aspect, the election of Kim does seem to be a foregone conclusion. Who do I don't see anybody out there giving money to the Parker campaign that would result in actual connection with the electorate.
Well, I mean, Parker has more than enough money in the bank to fund a very, very robust presence on election day. I think Parker's chance is more about the rest of the electorate splitting in ways that people just aren't necessarily considering. I mean, I could be wrong, and we'll be able to revisit this in a couple of weeks and see how it pans out. I just that's my take on how it's going to happen. The stuff with Gim, I just personally just don't. I don't see her support as being as much as it is, and I haven't seen her support building. I've seen, the people that support Gim support her, but I haven't seen many people changing over to supporting her. And I've seen some people who were swaying to sort of step back as she makes misstep after misstep. I mean, you've got the business with the Union League. This weekend, Ernest Owens, made it a point to, highlight her ties to her husband's connection to big pharmaceutical companies responsible for the opioid epidemic. I mean, even before she was running for mayor, there were a bunch of gaffes. I mean, was it the year before last she was trying to shut down an Asian American food truck for racism against Asian Americans,
Um,
or for her?
I mean,
Yeah, and
I
the
could
list
go on and on about
the list
my
goes on.
I have many similar reasons for not supporting Gim as mayor. And I think um, I think one way that we can talk about the election that um, isn't about bringing up specific things that candidates have done, but is important to the electorate, is to imagine each of the candidates winning. Like, what is their mayorship? What is their their time in office look like? With Parker, I look at the idea of a Parker mayorship, and I think this is just another, I don't know. It's another, just in a long line of Democrat mayorships that don't seem to go anywhere.
Well, you're right. If we have Parker as mayor, we are not going to see earth-shattering changes. Um, and that's just, it's going to be the status quo, and that's the absolute truth. There's just no getting around it. She's 100% the Democratic Party machine. Something that, this isn't really pertinent to who wins, but something I think that's really interesting about this election is, with so many candidates running, we're going to have the least democratic outcome possible, no matter who wins. You're going to have a city of 1.6 million people where the mayor is going to be decided by possibly 50,000 votes, maybe 60. And that's kind of terrifying, because whoever wins is not going to have a huge mandate. I mean, there's things that, moving forward, ranked choice voting might put us in a better position to avoid something like this in the future, especially with our single party dominance. But that's a different conversation. I just think it's important that we look that and acknowledge that a very small percentage of our society is going to decide who the executive is for at least the next 4 years.
I think that's a huge point. And unfortunately, all the candidates that have had an interest in ranked choice voting or pushing for voting reform or any sort of reform around how we elect people have dropped out of the race. Maria Quinones Sanchez was very interested in ranked choice voting. Um, uh, Councilmember Green.
Maria was my first choice. Maria was my first choice until she dropped out.
Yeah. And hers was a financial decision, interestingly enough. You bring up finances in elections and how they affect elections. She couldn't get enough backing financially to feel like she could run a campaign. And her parting shot at the campaign was really just to say, look, I would love to keep campaigning, but there's no way I can go up against people who have millions of dollars in their war chest. How do we even if we change the system, you talk about ranked choice voting. For those that don't know, ranked choice voting is where you get to rank your candidates in order of how much you like them. You pick a primary candidate that you want to win. You pick a second choice. If they can't get enough votes, then this is the person that you would prefer to see win if your primary choice can't win, etc. down the line. What that results in places where they have ranked choice voting is a campaign that lasts through election day for all the candidates. Any viable candidate could win in a ranked choice voting scenario. So the campaigns continue all the way into election day, which is a lot of money. When you're talking about campaigning that long, I don't know, maybe campaigns would start out a little bit later, but also, how do you, as a candidate like Maria, with good ideas and good experience, last through election day in a campaign season that extends an extra year?
Well, we need real campaign finance reform, most likely coupled with some form of public funding for elections. The biggest problem that I see with our current funding formulas is that we have donors, large amounts of donors from outside of the area, like whether it be the council district, the city, or even the state, dumping lots of money into campaigns. What I would do, if it were up to me personally, is I would have tiered campaign contribution limits based on your proximity to the actual place you're voting for. For in the city, for example, if you lived in the district and you were voting for a district council person, you were giving money to a district council person that you lived in that district, that would have the highest limit. And then possibly people outside of that district would have a lower limit. People outside of the city, but still in the state, would have an even lower limit. And people out of state, an even much lower limit. Because all of this money in campaigns is drowning out the voice of the residents, the people who actually get to vote for people. Like, we have obscene amounts of outside money all around. I mean, and then there just needs to be a limit on even self-financing of campaigns. Like, we can't have millionaires, rolling in and dropping, $5 million into their campaign. That's just a ridiculously unfair burden for all the other candidates to deal with. And, rich people already have it too easy in our country.
I'm always fascinated that you're a Republican, but I agree. I actually have for pretty much my entire life been a proponent of public finance campaigns. I think that anyone who wants to contribute to a campaign shouldn't be able to spend money directly with a candidate. They should have to give money to campaigning in general, and then the government equally doles out that money to all the candidates that reach some sort of threshold. Like, in Philadelphia we have the petition threshold to be able to run. I think that's a pretty good threshold. If you have X number of supporters already, then fine, you get X number of dollars in campaigning. Which is the same dollars that any other candidate gets. But yeah.
Yeah. The actual campaigning season itself should be a bit shorter as well. We shouldn't have to put up with a year's worth of political campaign. That's a lot.
I mean, yes, and also no. I mean, I feel like we're still finding out things about candidates even today. And I think that we find out more with the longer campaign seasons. But also it's a race to the finish financially. How do candidates afford to campaign for longer? and they can't. Nobody wants to give that much money to a campaign.
Well, I mean, people do want to give that much money, but then, our candidates are beholden to them,
Right.
and that's there's got to be some balance, between a reasonable time for campaigns and affordability for campaigning. The two concepts are definitely intertwined and related.
Yeah. And
No, well, real quick too, since since we're talking about the local politics, the mayor's race has really been stealing the show, but there are also, as you had briefly touched on earlier, there's going to be a new city council in essence, after these elections work out.
yeah.
So like there's like two things that I'd like to talk about with that. First, it's absolutely terrifying who the long-term incumbents are now. Kenyatta Johnson, Cindy Bass, and Curtis Jones.
Yeah.
That's
All three of
that's
which
the-
have had massive corruption and other scandals in their past, and not even in their distant past.
No, it's within, ongoing in some cases. It is absolutely terrifying. The flip side of that is that with so much new blood on council, we will have a unique opportunity for some serious reform. I will not be holding my breath for that serious reform to happen, but the potential does exist for it to happen. No, what I wanted to talk a little bit about was the district races, not the at-large races. So the district races are surprisingly uncompetitive, or unsurprisingly uncompetitive, if you think about our local political scene. But we do have one that's not being talked about right now, and we have Cindy Bass facing Seth Oberman Anderson in the 8th district. Seth has gotten some pretty heavy endorsements from progressive organizations.
Excuse me.
I believe DSA, the WFP, Reclaim, Representative Chris Robb, and several other groups have endorsed his campaign. I would like any of your listeners in the 8th district to take a look at both of the candidates and seriously consider which to support, because many may not know there is in fact a challenger at this point. It's been a long time. There's been a serious challenger.
Well,
And then
the problem with Philadelphia politics at the council level almost turns into the opposite problem that we had for the mayor's office this year. There are no candidates. Running completely, literally unopposed is the worst possible candidate for Council President Darrell Clark's outgoing position. His district is going to be taken over by a person who should not hold political office.
That specifically is doubly terrifying. It's an interesting situation though, and largely the result of Darrell Clark's actions. Council President Clark waited until the middle of nomination petition circulation time to announce his retirement, ostensibly to give his chief of staff a head up on collecting the necessary signatures to get on the ballot. Now, what happened was you had then 7 candidates rushed to do this, and unfortunately, the only one who was able to gather the 750 signatures that could withstand a challenge in court is a rather terrible person. I don't even want to give him the credit because he's going to win anyway. So
yeah, I don't know in my head his name yet, and I also don't care because I don't think he'll last more than one election cycle. I think go ahead.
The point I wanted, this is actually one of the things I wanted to talk about is this man is going to become a city council member based strictly on collecting 750 signatures to get on the ballot. And that's a terrifyingly low bar for this person to, have basically to be like the mini mayor of 1/10 of the city, in essence.
Right.
It's incredibly undemocratic. And when you stop and think about it, there were 6 other candidates. None of them was able to collect the 750 signatures that were needed to stay on the ballot, but each of them made a pretty serious effort. Well, most of them made a serious effort. There were 1 or 2 that were a little suspect, but the end result of which is you had, 3 or 4 times the number, well, 2 or 3 times the number of people who signed petitions for the successful candidate signed petitions for other candidates. And again, like the mayor, we're going to wind up where a system where somebody is squeaking by with just the barest of minimum, getting on the ballot even before there were a chance for something like ranked choice voting. It's doubly bad.
Yeah.
And it's really a problem we have a single party political system and closed primaries. And it's, people are being denied the choice to have a meaningful say in who their representatives are. And that's, that's scary. And it's kind of it's a tenement, or it's a bad sign for, our political system as a whole. It doesn't bode well for freedom.
Um, Interestingly, I think that one of the saving graces of council in general is the rule that protects 2 seats for a minority party. Uh, uh, and what is also interesting is that I think this is probably going to be the first election since that rule was made that there are no Republicans on council.
Well, that would be assuming Brian O'Neill loses in the 10th, but
I think Brian O'Neill is going to lose in the 10th. I also don't think Sam Opreza is actually going to win his bid for council at large, because the Republicans can't support anybody. The Republican Party in Philadelphia doesn't seem to be able to support anybody. They do have a council at large candidate that they're trying to support, but nobody knows who that is.
Drew Murray
Huh?
is Drew Murray is
Yeah.
the other Republican candidate.
And so the Democratic machine in Philadelphia, or I would say the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party created the Working Families Party, and the Working Families Party has enough viable at-large candidates that I think that it will be an all-Democrat and Working Families Party council coming up, which I find interesting.
I think that's a fair prediction, and there is a decent chance of it coming true. The WFP is not a creation of the progressive Democrats in Philadelphia. I mean, they are a legitimate political party elsewhere. But their manifestation on the ground here in Philadelphia is definitely a front for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. How many members of the WFP do you think there are in Philadelphia? Like people registered as WFP members?
Oh, I have no idea. It's relatively small. It's much smaller than the Republican Party.
I mean, just take a wild guess.
1,000?
Try 12.
12. Okay.
Yeah, 12. Last I checked, there were 12 active members. I mean, it's the number is so comically small that it's almost embarrassing for them. I mean, they've definitely latched onto a strategy. The fact that you get 5 votes for at large, it's a very easy sell to progressives to say, hey, you're going to have 5 Democrats no matter what, take 2 of your votes and help rub out the Republicans who you don't like. And that's a very compelling argument for people. And I can see why, that's why you think we're going to have a WFP, two minority party representation. And it's probably right. It's why David O resigned. He saw the writing on the wall. He didn't want to lose.
I also I also think that um not just what you're saying is a motivation, but also for folks like me who find the Democratic Party distasteful because they don't go far enough. I think there's a lot of support for Working Family Party's candidates because they are the progressive wing in Philadelphia. They're the progressive wing of the Democratic Party without the filter of the Democratic Party machine. You get candidates from the WFP who are willing to say publicly defund the police and not edit it. You get from the WFP in Philadelphia. You get the activism stances that just dyed in the wool Democrats aren't willing to take. Which, yeah.
I mean, that's the message we're being sold, but the reality of Kendra Brooks' record on city council does not reflect that.
Sure.
She has never voted against, and to the best of my knowledge, she has never voted against something supported by the Democratic Party on council.
Yeah, but then look at like Krajewski and who's the Senate?
Well, Rick is a Democrat. He's not WFP.
Right, but he was supported. He's supported mostly by the WFP and works most closely with the WFP.
Rick Krajewski was put in by Reclaim.
Yes.
And he does work with WFP, but Reclaim is most definitely the Democratic Party. Rick is the 188th district representative, and that is my district. And it's actually interesting. Rick actually got elected in kind of a similar situation to what we're having now. Two elections ago, he faced off against, there were 4 people running, and that's how he was able to beat the incumbent. He wasn't my candidate of choice then, but I've been, impressed with his track record. And, he shows up, and, even though I might not agree with everything he says, I do believe that he is sincere in what he does. And for me, that's perhaps more important than agreeing on everything.
Yeah, well, to swing back to mayoral election, that's what I find most important about a mayoral candidate too. I don't think that I find Gim's campaign insincere. You mentioned like the people that she's showing up with now. I have been active in Philadelphia politics for many years, and I have literally been the representative of some of those groups trying to get council members to work with them. And I have literally seen Councilmember Gim's office deny me the access that I needed to get the council member on board. I have literally, and for, I mean, I've pulled back a lot from work in those groups recently because I've got a 2-year-old, and it takes up most of my time. But I can tell you that they have in the past not had access to the council member because that's how she runs her office. She runs her office in a way that she interacts with the people or persons who can give her the most clout or money. That's been my experience. That's been other people's experience. I've had pushback on that from Gim supporters, but I've had no actual pushback from from people who have worked with or know Gim in person. And
That's
go ahead.
that would seem fairly accurate, from what I've heard, from people who know and have worked with her personally. What I have heard her described as very confrontational. Is how I've heard. That's how I've heard a lot of people describe her style, and that troubles me because I think we're going to need people to be able to work together as opposed to confront one another.
Right.
In
And
a
even above and beyond the confrontationality, I mean, that's just a tactic. I mean, some people work best by creating confrontation and thereby creating an environment which they feel they can get things done. Um, the part of this that troubles me is, other than Gim, the other candidates seem to actually have an ethos or a way that they feel something behind their candidacy that is more important than the power that they are going to gain. So if you look at Reihart has always done things regardless of whether or not it could cause her to get fired. So she, as comptroller, she released many reports and had many things that, okay, maybe not entirely, but everybody's going to protect themselves a little bit here and there. But my point is, her modus operandi has always been evidence based. So she tends to do things based on the evidence presented to her, like recommendations that she makes to the mayor's office as comptroller were based on evidence, not political expediency. And as her campaign goes on, I see like whoever is creating her campaign talking points or her herself have been doing things adjusting her stances based on the evidence that is coming to her. I don't think all of that evidence is the best evidence. I think she's being fed stuff that isn't accurate by people who want to affect her campaign. But still, in general,
I do.
Go ahead.
So, like, Ryan is very well qualified for the position, but I don't think she is the right person. So Reinhardt was recruited to the municipal government under the Nutter administration.
Yeah.
So before she joined the municipal government, she worked at Bear Stearns,
Yeah.
the Wall Street firm, in their credit derivatives department.
Yeah.
Okay. She left weeks before Bear Stearns collapsed because of the results of the actions of the credit derivatives department. Maybe not her personally, but her part of the bank imploded, destroying the bank, which then caused the subprime mortgage crisis that caused a massive recession in the country that lasted, it was a year and change. It was absolutely terrible. Thousands and thousands of people lost their homes. And this is something that she was directly involved in. It's not like an abstract thing. Like, her part of the bank did this to our country. But so then, that's a while ago. She leaves and she's brought in as, I believe she came on as the budget director first.
Yeah.
And and she did her job there pretty well. And then they moved her over to was finance director. I forget the official other title. And then, supposedly she ran as controller against the machine, unseating Butkovich. But that's a very rosy interpretation of what actually happened. Okay, the previous controller, Butkovich, right around the time that Reinhardt decided to run, exposed Mayor Nutter's use of a slush fund to pay what was his mistress a whole bunch of money for a job. Now, you can look into the specifics yourself later, but that's why she ran for controller, She was put in by Nutter's people with, the support of his donors. Like, she's not a party outsider as she portrays herself to be. Now, to her credit, when she got in, she took a very professional approach to being controller. She does look into all departments. She seems to have a history of looking into departments that someone who is not a Democratic machine person takes over in short order. We got our new sheriff, and very soon after, Reinhardt starts looking into her. The machine loses a hold, and she starts digging in. The Donatucci gets knocked out as the Register of Wills, and then all of a sudden Reinhardt's looking at the Register of Wills office. I mean, there's a pattern of these kind of things going on, and I just don't buy that she is this independent person that she claims to be. And then on another level, and this is a good government thing that really bothers me. Reinhardt waited to announce to resign her job and announced her mayoral candidacy until it was too late to get a replacement on the ballot last fall. So she intentionally made a decision to deny the people of Philadelphia the opportunity to choose who their controller was for a period of 6 months. Now, Reinhardt she's been campaigning in slow motion for years. It's been at least 2 or 3 years that it has been, known she is running for mayor. She's been stacking money the entire time, collecting money until she publicly announced collecting money from nothing but large campaign donors, like $1,000 and up. Like, she's part of the machine, and she represents the rich part of society, and I just don't like it, especially her connection with Wall Street banks and pretending to be a political outsider. Her initial campaigning, like the stuff you would see online, tried to portray her as a political outsider, and she received a lot of pushback on that and had to walk it back because it's just not true. She has a history of wanting to privatize the water department and the gas department. If she becomes mayor, that's gonna be seriously on the table again. And that's going to mean, if it happens, increased rates. That's what happens every time you privatize utilities.
Sure,
Like,
because regardless of what everybody else says, the government actually does some things really well. Especially,
well, I mean, it does. Yeah, it does a really good job of not charging as much money as it could for utilities.
Well, it does. I find that the government institutions are best at things that are necessities of life. So I'm all for government-based healthcare, even though everybody's like, oh, but government-based healthcare would be so inefficient. And I'm like, well, yeah, but look at the Social Security department. It takes care of people for less money than any private retirement plan, and it does it well. It doesn't pay enough, but it does it well.
It does it better than we have. But I mean, we don't have to look at our country for examples. You can look at privatized healthcare in other countries in Europe and see that there is a way to do it. I mean, it means higher taxes, but we're all being stealth taxed anyway by a forced mandate to buy private health insurance. If everyone was taking that money and paying it to a single payer system, it would cost less. That's just economics.
Right. I'm interested to talk Parker, and I'm not as interested to talk Dom or Brown. I think Brown should drop out of the election. He's not going to, because he's a rich guy and he loves waving his money around. And Dom is actually a viable candidate, but I don't see him actually winning. He's
no, yeah. Brown and Dom are definitely in the bottom tier of the candidates we have, and I think I made it clear that I don't like the ultra rich, running things, which precludes both of them from for my endorsement.
Yeah.
Although
I
I do view Brown as the likely second place candidate, though.
You think so?
I would picture I would picture the election, the results on election day being something like Parker, Jeff Brown, and then Reinhardt or Gim.
Hmm. I don't see Brown getting that much support, but I could be wrong.
I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
It's the most competitive and interesting race for mayor we've had in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's uncharted territory. We could we could be both completely off base, and somehow Almond Brown becomes mayor.
I don't
That might be.
know. That's not. So one of the I mean, you've brought Parker up in my estimation as far as how many votes she's gonna get, but I'm willing to bet it'll be like Gim Parker Reihart Parker Gim somewhere in there.
Well, I mean, as I said in the first segment, I think no matter which candidate wins, I can walk away feeling a little bit better about Philadelphia politics, at least if it's a woman,
Yeah.
given that the women are the most
Yeah, and
qualified.
I will walk away from this election feeling like at least we heard a few viewpoints. It would be nice if we heard more, if there were more actual choice. I feel like this election, like many elections, turns into, hey, we've got a number of people. They're all saying exactly the same thing. So which one do you like best?
I
But
mean, this election has really been about crime.
yeah,
Has been the number one issue, and I mean we live in a great city. There is so much else going on, but it is the biggest concern, and it's just you know we really only have kind of two approaches that people are advocating is you know you've got the let's defund the police, Helen Gim, and then everybody else is like, yeah, we need more police. That if the race were just being looked at that, you've got two choices basically,
I
and
think
I do think that.
this was the basis of my argument with Rick this morning, and I haven't seen many of the most recent advertisements or like public statements. But I think it's nuanced. Like the way people are talking about more police is nuanced, and I at least appreciate that. Um, the Green campaign. Green was on our show, and he talked about his like. I straight up asked him, like, why are you supporting more policing when it shows that it won't solve the problem? And his answer was very nuanced. He was like, it's not just more policing. It's training them to do a job more effectively, also limiting the number of things that the police are doing and focusing them on things that they do well. Also this, also that. So it was interesting and nuanced, and I I would like to talk to all of them about that, that aspect. And I do think that's the crux of the election. Unfortunately, I don't think it's as important as everybody else thinks it is. But yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, no. It, so like, you're absolutely right. Like, it is a nuanced thing. I just don't see the answers. I mean, the truth is, we need better policing combined with addressing the root causes of crime.
Right.
Like, we need both.
Yeah.
Like, one or the other is not going to solve our problems.
Yep.
And I haven't said I haven't. I mean, I guess Parker in a little way is she's kind of hinted at, oh, we need to address the problems, but she's been on the very law and order side of things, and Helen Gim has been very, we need to address the causes of crime, but has just, stayed completely away from any type of commitment to even better policing, not even more policing.
Right.
So it seems the closer we get to the election, the less nuanced we're getting from the candidates. I mean, Jeff Brown has been like, I'm endorsed by every police union,
Yeah.
hooray for cops. Like, there's no accountability there. I mean, maybe it's just Reinhardt isn't a great public speaker. It's something she does have a nuanced approach, but it just doesn't come off that way.
Right. Yeah. And that was Rick's response, was that she's just for more police. I'm like, no, it's much more nuanced than that. It's filling the positions on the police department that aren't filled. That's not more police. That's just hiring the same number of police. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the really complicated thing. Like, saying defund the police is terrible marketing, but having civilians do clerical work for the police so that the same number of police officers can focus more on dealing with crime, is great policy.
Yeah.
And they're the same thing. It's just, it's how you describe it to people.
Yeah. All right, I gotta run.
Me too. I have some
noon.
work stuff to do.
I appreciate this conversation. I would like to have more conversation. I'm going to be talking Philly mayoral race for the next several weeks anyway, so feel free to jump back on.
Yeah, I'll try to pop in. I actually have my Wednesdays cleared for a little bit, because I'm getting in the run up to do my election stuff. So I'll try to jump in. At least once or twice more before the election.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation, and thank you to everybody who's watched thus far. I really appreciate your time. I'm gonna go ahead and head out to the title card, and enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. We'll be back next week with another coffee break chat.